Hello and welcome to the School Mentor Podcast. My name is Miff Martinek and this is the podcast where we talk about all things coaching and mentoring within the school setting. Now this is episode 17 and today we are going to talk about imposter syndrome. I really wanted to bring this topic up. It's something that has entered my conversations a lot in the past few months. And I think that that's partly because I'm currently formalising some of my coaching and doing my ILM level 7 qualification, which is really fascinating. But as part of it, I'm doing some one-to-one coaching, which typically I haven't done in the past. Most of my coaching is in that group setting. But I'm doing more one-to-one coaching. And because of that, I think I'm hearing about people's personal experience of imposter syndrome a lot. And I think it relates to the experience that our pupils, that our students have when they're in school, particularly at this time of year as we head towards exams. This is something that we feel ourselves, but certainly something that we could improve for our young people, for those pupils and those students in our care. So I thought that this was a really good point in time to give you some ideas and perspective about how to think around imposter syndrome. I think everyone in the world has experienced it at some point when they are out of their comfort zone and they are filled with self-doubt as to whether or not they can accomplish the task ahead of them. I certainly know from my experience, the time I felt most like an imposter was standing on stage. I was at Camford School and I had just come back from maternity leave. I think I'd had my daughter maybe like 7 or 8 months prior. And I was that classic new mum who everything, like my whole world had been turned upside down. It was still in kind of lockdown times as well. So everything was topsy-turvy in the world. Everything was very topsy-turvy in my brain. And I was preparing this inset day talk for the team at Camford. And I can remember thinking, why on earth do they want to hear from me? Like, what value can I offer? I'm just some like sleep-deprived, slightly deranged lady at the moment. And I can remember starting to piece together sort of the presentation that I was going to do. And there were points where I was standing in my kitchen with my mum friends sitting around and they're sort of feeding the children on the floor in like picnic style. And it's utter chaos. And I'm trying to run through my slides and they're trying to listen and give me constructive feedback. And it was just absolute chaos. But I got onto that stage filled with nervousness, filled with trepidation, and I knocked it out of the park. I really did. I had such an incredible time delivering that talk, and I got amazing feedback from it afterwards. And as I reflect back on that experience now, I can start to see the value in how useful all of that imposter syndrome that I had started, how valuable that was in creating something incredible that I actually ended up going ahead and delivering. Because without that fear of what I felt was unknown, or without feeling so far out of my comfort zone, I perhaps wouldn't have put the same level of energy and care into what I was producing. I wouldn't have treated it in quite the same way. And so I start to reflect on that experience. And I've had imposter syndrome at various points in my life. And I'm sure that you listening to this as well have found times where you can easily identify those times where you have felt like an imposter as well. And I want to start thinking about how we frame this in our minds. And to start with, let's just think about why imposter syndrome is a thing. Like, why is this something that we are even talking about? And I think there are a couple of things that are worth flagging. The first one is that we now, more than any time in history, have got the ability to compare ourselves to anybody we want. We look around our surroundings, and we are connected online, and we can pull up someone's Instagram page or their Facebook page or their LinkedIn profile, and we can look at everything that's going on there. We pull up school websites and we compare our school and the role that we're doing with what somebody else is doing. And we create so much more comparison than was ever available to us 10, 20 years ago. And that immediately will start to trigger off the parts of our brain that make us feel unworthy, that make us feel like we're under threat because, oh my goodness, look how great everyone else looks. We all know that everyone's putting their best foot forward. We know that logically, but we don't know it emotionally. So we just instinctively believe that everyone's having such a wonderful time on Instagram. We know it's the highlight reel when we think about it logically. Of course, they're not going to post pictures of their children having tantrums and them crying because they didn't do well in a promotion. They're not going to record that stuff. Of course they're not. But in our heads, we forget that, and we don't emotionally know it, even if we logically do. The other thing is that because of this connected nature and because of the way that we work, there is so much opportunity to rehearse scenarios in our heads before we actually have to just get on and start doing things. Now, I really experienced this personally through starting to record this podcast. I used to sit here doing my first couple of episodes, I'd overthink it, and I'd write all these hundreds of notes, and it would be this big convoluted thing. And I would record it and re-record it over and over again. It would end up being this kind of quite long, lengthy thing. And you can probably notice how much more nervous I am in those first episodes. But actually, as soon as I just started, it got easier. Because imposter syndrome lives in the realm of before it started. Imposter syndrome only exists before you get into it. And when you actually get into it and you start making progress, you start to build up that proof that you do belong in that scenario. You do belong in the place where you want to be. And yes, it's going to be difficult. And yes, you might feel like you haven't earned it until you've achieved everything. But you must know that in a month's time, in 6 months' time, in a year's time, that all these things that are overwhelming you right now in this new role, in this level of responsibility, will actually just feel like second nature to you. It's how we evolve as humans, as how we continue to develop. So, yes, there is absolutely a dark side to imposter syndrome. And that is when we see it as suffering in silence and the imposter syndrome stopping us from connecting to the people around us and stopping us from fulfilling what our potential is and fulfilling the goals and the dreams that we have for ourselves. But the good, for me, outweighs the bad. And the good is that indication that you're out of your comfort zone and you're pushing yourself. The good is that little sense of humility, and you have to choose to see it this way. It's not nervousness, it's not incompetence, it's humility, a little bit of awareness that you are learning and you're on a journey and you aren't an expert yet. And the good side is also the teamwork that has to come out of imposter syndrome, because when we feel like we can't do it all, then we can build a team around us to help us. So when we are looking at how to address imposter syndrome, and when we are thinking about what we can do to manage the intensity of emotion that we are experiencing through this, I encourage you to think about those 3 areas. The first one is that self-awareness. Notice, first off, that this is what you are feeling. You're not feeling good enough. You're not feeling like you know all the answers to everything. And it's awareness, not critique. You aren't there to criticize yourself for not knowing all the answers. You are there to bring awareness to elements where you might be out of your comfort zone. And when you do that, you can also start to notice all the things that are still within your comfort zone. The second one is humility. The worst thing that you can do if you are feeling like you have imposter syndrome is just try and BS your way through it. It's just try and pretend that you know everything, because you will get caught out, and that will prove that you are an imposter and that you don't belong in that role. The best thing that you can do is to approach it with some humility. And when you do that, you recognize your weaknesses and you say, hey, this is a growth opportunity. This is an opportunity for me to work with my team to strengthen me, and so that I can use the bits that I already know I'm great at to strengthen them and to work towards our goal. So the humility that it builds is fantastic. And the last piece is around that team and is around communication. And if you've listened to any of my episodes, you know that I believe in building connection and communication as a foundation for absolutely everything, particularly within a school. And this is addressed. This imposter syndrome is also addressed by building those connections and working on that communication. Because there is nothing better than a leader who can say, I feel like I have my vision, I want to work towards these goals, and I know that these are my strengths and these are where I want my team to work with me, because I can identify that you have that strength that I'm perhaps missing. I can identify that you have that skill set that I've not developed yet. And we can work together on our joint vision, on our joint goal. When we do that, when we come to leadership with that level of humility and that connection and that value that we're placing in other people, it's incredibly transformational. That is what creates a strong team, not a leader who is BSing their way through life and just hoping that nobody will notice that they don't know everything. That's not a leader. That's someone that everyone moans about while they have a coffee. What we want from a leader is someone who is humble enough to identify the areas where they are not necessarily skilled or strong in, and be able to pull together the team around them and motivate them towards a shared vision or a shared goal. I worked with a friend yesterday who was going forward for a job interview. Now, she's coming out of maternity leave and she is incredible at her job. Just incredible. Any time that I hear her speak about it, the amount of passion that she has for it, the vision that she has for the area that she works in is amazing. It really is amazing. But she's going forward for this job, and as she would describe it, she says it's a pretty punchy job. And she is having a sense of imposter syndrome because she's done the job before. She's done all of the elements of it. But there's one part about the setting that she's not familiar with. And we were having this conversation about how can she address that? And she said, I just don't know the answer. I just don't know. And I said, well, why would anyone expect you to know? Anyone who reads your CV will read all of the amazing stuff that you have done, but it never says that you've done that other thing. So you don't need to go in and BS them. You need to go in and have confidence in all this value that you are bringing to the table and have the humility to recognize when there's a little bit of support that's needed or when someone else's experience is more relevant and you can draw on that. And the ability to do that is what they will be looking for in a leader in this role that you're applying for. And it was a slightly revelatory moment to just say, hey, it's okay to not know everything. It's okay. And I think this really, really relates to how our young people are feeling, particularly as we go into exams. And I've got lots of opinions about exams and the value of them and the pressure that they put on young people. But drawing back and allowing our young people a little bit of space to say, I am feeling this way. Let me reflect on myself. Let me bring some awareness. What specifically is making me doubt myself in this situation? What specifically is it? Because the devil is in the detail. And when we can identify that the reason they're feeling inadequate is because they haven't done enough revision for biology, but that doesn't actually relate to some of these other elements. And it doesn't relate to all of this evidence that they have that they can do a great job. When we pause, when we listen, when we draw this information out for them, we can reflect back to them all of the greatness that they have inside of them. And we can help them to reach out for the support that they need in the one or two areas where they might not feel as strong. So what I'd love you to take away from this episode is that, yes, imposter syndrome can be a scary and very deeply uncomfortable experience. But it's also a great lesson in self-awareness, in humility, and in teamwork. And that those are the three areas that will help you address the imposter syndrome that you experience, or equally the imposter syndrome that perhaps your students, your pupils are experiencing. I hope this has been a useful session. Now, I have some exciting news, and that is that I've been developing a series of free drop-in sessions. They're going to be running on Thursday afternoons. The first one is going to be next week. So they're going to be a 45-minute session on Zoom, and we're going to cover off a topic that's really important and valuable in the school setting. Next week, we're going to be talking all about anxiety, both managing kind of your own anxiety, what things you can do there, but also supporting students and young people with their anxiety and the emotions that they have. There'll be a load of opportunity to share your experience and learn from other people that are in the room. I'll be sharing a bit of my knowledge, some of the tools that you can use, some of the actions that you can take ahead of time and in the moment. So I'm going to be running all of that in these sessions. If you are interested in finding out a little bit more about that, you can drop onto the website and send us a message, and I'll get you the invite and the information over to you. But until then, and until the next episode, have an amazing rest of the week, and I will see you in a week's time. Take care.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the School Mentor Podcast. We hope you're leaving today's episode feeling inspired to create a stronger, more connected school community. To access more resources, be sure to visit our website at this-is-me.uk. It would mean the world to us if you subscribed, rated and reviewed our podcast, and shared it with your fellow educators. Until next time, thank you for inspiring, mentoring, and changing the lives of the young people in your community.